Hello everybody, it's Thursday and so that means it is Think Differently Thursday. I hope you've enjoyed the snow this week. What an incredible week it's been. My name is Helen and always have someone lovely to chat to, and today it's Jenny. Hi Jenny.
Hi Helen.
How are you?
Yeah, we're good. We're here in a very snowy Wickham Skeeth. I see the milk trucks just got through, so that's quite an encouragement. But we're not going anywhere at the moment.
I bet.
Tomorrow, but
if the milk's got through, that bodes well for the dustman, because we haven't had the dustman yet. I am on a slope, and so I think nothing's coming up our road.
Not so easy then.
Are you someone that loves the snow?
Yeah, I enjoyed the snow. We've gone out and played in it. Yesterday we had a nice long walk in it, and the ground's actually a bit harder under the snow. It's been so muddy, hasn't it? Because we've been walking every day, knee deep in mud round here, and so it's been lovely to walk on some frozen ground for a chance through the snow. So
I think
pictures from our family has been sent because we have a son in New York, and which we'll talk about maybe later. But they're in deep snow.
I heard.
So we have it light, really.
I think we have. I think there's nothing better than a little bit of sunshine when it's snowing. That's my favourite. Just looks lovely.
That's true.
So just like, I know you have known you for a long time, just like in a nutshell, just tell people who you are.
Well, I'm Jenny Elphick. I'm married to Will Elphick. We've been in the Forge Church for years and years and years, I guess 27, 28, something like that. We were about the 30th member, I think, to join, although there wasn't then. And yeah, I live here in rural Wickham Skeeth, and we've been here since 1990. So most of my career has been involved around Suffolk, which I love. I love Suffolk.
And for people that don't know, Wickham Skeeth is a tinsy little Suffolk village, isn't it? So are the roads a bit impassable at the moment?
Oh yeah, totally. Wickham Skeeth means place in the middle of nowhere, which I think it truly is. But we love that, I'm not complaining about it. And yes, but we're also a lovely, tight-knit community. We walk out and everybody knows the names of everybody's dogs. And it is lovely and friendly, and has become even more so during lockdown.
Yeah, lovely. So you've said you've been there a while, and that's definitely not a Suffolk accent that you have there. So where are you from? Where was home originally?
Well, I was originally born in Woolwich, which is where my family were. We moved to Eltham. So no Suffolk accent at all. In fact, when Will first met me in my younger life, I had a real Southeast London accent, and he's kind of put me straight. So he would have said I was brought up in the gutter, but you don't hear that now. When my sister and I get together, we kind of both degenerate into Southeast London.
So tell me about growing up. What was the child Jenny like? Where did you grow up, and was it happy childhood? How was it?
Yeah, it was a very happy childhood. I loved my family. We were a close family, mum and dad, and a lovely sister Anne. She's 2 years older than me. We were very close. I mean, we had our issues from time to time, but she's been really supportive and loving all our lives. We lived in Eltham, where I went to a Church of England school where my mum taught. And so I was actually in my mum's class for a time. I learned lots of my teaching skills from my mother. And we went to church, in a Church of England church, quite a high church, but that was my experience, being taking my first communion at 8, that kind of thing. And then at 11, we wanted to move out more rurally. We moved to a place called Chelsfield outside Orpington, to a small farm. We bought a farm, and it was really exciting. And that's where life continued. We had horses, 5 of them, and I enjoyed competing, eventing, show jumping. I did all. Yeah, we were members of the Kent riding clubs and pony clubs. So a lot of my teenage years were spent on horses, and the other part was spent with boyfriends. So it was kind of riding, a little bit of schoolwork, and boyfriends, the usual.
Sounds like quite a perfect childhood and growing up.
Was, yeah.
So actually being in a very rural location now is not dissimilar to growing up then, having that space and countryside around you.
Exactly. Although now we really don't have any animals. When I was growing up, we had the horses, calves, chickens. I had a pig called Ruth, who was my A-level project while I was growing up. She was one of those Wessex saddlebacks, and she was gorgeous. And a donkey called Daffodil. So, you know, it was one of those, you know, we had everything growing up, really. It was very, very fortunate.
That does sound lovely, particularly all of that horse riding sounds amazing.
Yes.
And so I know about your teaching career, and lots of your life has been around education. You just said that your mom was a teacher. Yeah, school was a good experience. Were you a studier, a learner? Was that you, someone that engaged with learning?
Yes, yes. I took what I wanted and left the rest,
Okay.
like a lot of people do, I think.
Yeah,
I did enjoy my school. I went to Eltham Hill Grammar School for Girls, which was exactly as it sounds. And because we moved out to Warpington, it was quite a trek into school each day, because we decided to stay in the same school. But it was a good school in that, because it was a grammar school in really London, we were used as guinea pigs for all the new schemes, new maths, new science. We did everything, and it was really good fun. And as guinea pigs and for research. And then, but it was quite a structured day I had. We started at 6 in the morning with mucking out and stables, putting horses into rugs and putting them out. We were still doing that the other way around, bringing the horses in, feeding them, rugging them up at night, at 11 o'clock at night. So it was schoolwork, horses, there was a ritual to it. And then the weekends, let down your hair.
Sounds lovely. I'm getting this whole image of Jenny the horse rider that I had absolutely no idea about. Great.
I got to a point inventing when I beat Princess Anne. You know, I was at that sort of level.
Really?
I thought, Helen, sorry.
No, this is really interesting.
I had a horse in VHS called Rupert, and sadly, I don't ride now. But my sister's still very involved in horses, riding stables. Yeah.
Wow. I find horses a little bit scary. They're so big, and
they're all
I just think they're a bit unpredictable.
Oh, that's true, but that's fun.
I think I've just ridden some horses over the years. Sorry, I just think I've ridden some horses over the years, you know, only on like holidays and trekking, that sort of thing, and just thought, I'm pretending, or everyone around me is pretending I'm controlling this horse. I'm absolutely certain this horse would do anything it wanted to. And that's why I'm a bit scared of them. I think to be able to control a horse and have a relationship with a horse, I think must be, really lovely. And I think, like you're saying, everyone's out walking now, aren't they? And when I walk and I see people out on horses across the fields, I think, that's the dream.
That would be lovely. Yeah,
really nice. True. So after school, you went to uni. So that, I presume, was a 4-year teaching degree in those days?
No, I didn't do that to start with. I went to University, which is the agricultural faculty for London University, based just outside Canterbury. And I did a degree in animal sciences.
Oh, okay.
My first degree was in animal sciences. Although growing up, I have to say, I had so many teachers in our family. There were 4 head teachers in my family. So I think teaching's in the blood in my family, really. So I knew that at some stage I would probably go back to teaching, but I wanted to do the animal sciences first, which was great fun, but then decided what I didn't want to do was work in a lab for the rest of my life. And the 3 years were very lab based. And so at that point I decided, no, let's do something different, and then did a PGCE at Bath. So I went down to live in Bath, but that comes up later in our story.
Interesting. I hadn't realised that was your path. So what were those uni days like? Were they wild uni days?
This was the 70s, Helen. Of course they were wild. Yes, I have to say, I probably overworked my guardian angel, to put it that way. I would certainly, we lived in a little keeper's cottage on the Pilgrim's Way. It was so pretty, but still lived quite a wild life and enjoyed ourselves. Very involved with politics at that stage. And my student union, I stood for the president of the union, and did political rallies, went to student marches in London, that kind of lifestyle.
Okay.
But I think I must have been a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde character, because at the same time as doing that, secretly, every week I went to Brownies and I was Snowy Owl, which I had to keep very quiet because it was so uncool at the time to do anything like that, that I kept that really quiet. And also at the weekends I was competing in the eventing, so my parents would take my horse to the event. I would arrive and meet them there, do the event, and then come back to university.
Wow.
So all of that,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much kept a secret too.
Wow, you'd got all these different lives going on. That's really interesting.
It's true.
And so was Will at uni? Is that where you met? Tell us about how you met Will. Was it love at first sight? That's what I really want to know.
He always tells this wonderful story. It was love at first sight. I saw him. He had this gorgeous long hair, longer than mine now, and this gorgeous black hat and a big trench coat. And he was the DJ. It was the uni DJ, so he was the cool character. And on my first freshers' day, I did go up to him and thought, I like that, and had a chat. But he really didn't show much interest. He was far too busy doing his disco.
Perhaps he was just being cool. Perhaps he was just playing hard to get.
Definitely. But then later on, I was in the drama society. He was producing. I was the stage manager. So really it was kind of love behind the curtains, and we were involved in so much together.
Right.
And yeah, I fell madly in love with him, and he with me. But he was a year older. He had a plan that had been in place for a long time to leave university at the end and go to Sierra Leone to do VSO, voluntary service overseas. And so he left while I did my third year, and I was pretty heartbroken, to be honest with you. It wasn't a good time. He left.
Okay, and so you then, how did you come back together? Presumably he came back after that time, and you...
After 7 months of him being out there, he invited me out to go and visit, and so I did. And it was a fabulous place, Sierra Leone. Acres of white sand, blue sea, blue sky. He had this little motorbike, and we just drove up and down. You can imagine, into the mountains and back. It was really romantic. But I noticed that he had loads of questions that he was asking. He was really unsettled about his purpose for life. What was the purpose? What was his meaning for life? You know, and he would say, well, when you look at the stars, Jenny, what are you thinking? And I'm thinking, I have no answers.
And had this changed? Were you seeing something different in him since he'd gone away, or had that always been there in him?
Well, he'd always been a thinking person, an asking. I think that's part of his political background as well. The fact that we were so left-wing and so actively involved in things, that he wanted the world to be a better place. And I think this was part of his thinking of, how do you make the world a better place? Well, what is my part in making the world a better place? And I was really very impressed with that, but couldn't answer it. Anyway, I went home, and then he wrote a letter and proposed to me. I was ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic. I remember the day to this time, you know.
Were you expecting that? Was that a surprise? Oh,
surprise. And so this airmail letter arrived, you know, asking, would I marry him? And I had a big lab that day at uni, this poor decerebrate chicken that I was experimenting on really suffered, because all I could think about was, Will's asked me to marry him.
And so was that a case of writing back to say yes?
Yeah, of course. Because
that is so romantic.
It was lovely. Anyway, not many weeks after that, I received a second letter telling me that he'd become a Christian. And I was shocked to the core, to be honest. I really didn't like Christians at this stage of life. I'd had some bad experiences. My church growing up hadn't been the best. At uni, I'd had some bad experiences, and I really thought this wasn't going to work. So although I booked the venue, we'd set a date, the church was all booked, I cancelled everything.
Wow.
And so I waited and told him this, and he came home. And we spent a whole month together just talking. And I knew that I'd had some misconceptions. I kind of thought you had to be born a Christian. You couldn't just choose to become one, or even how you would choose to become one.
Right.
And I noticed in Will this complete change. He was so at peace of mind. He had answered all those questions.
Right.
And it was so attractive in him
Yeah.
that I really wanted some of that. And so after a month of lots and lots of questions, I plucked up the courage and I took a gin and tonic to the toilet. And I sat on the toilet. And when I was at primary school, I had a Christian head teacher. We had a picture, the Halt picture of Jesus knocking at the door with the lantern and the no handle on the door. He'd explain that picture every year to us.
Right.
And at the time, it didn't have a personal meaning. But as I sat there, I remembered that picture and I knew Revelations 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and I knock. Anyone who hears my voice, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. Somehow I knew that. I don't think I knew any other verse, but I knew that one. And it just reverberated in my mind. And so I prayed this prayer that Jesus would come into my heart and into my life. And I sat there and nothing happened, Helen. Nothing happened. And I was kind of disappointed. And I came out and I said to Will, well, that prayer you've been telling me about, I've said it, but nothing's happened. So we were living with his parents at the time in Hampshire. And we walked up onto the downs, the Hampshire Downs, and we sat down. It was a lovely sunny day, I remember. And he said, well, what did you say in your prayer? So I said, well, I asked Jesus to come into my life. And he said, well, where do you think Jesus is now? And I thought about it and I said, well, he must be in my life. And at that moment, I had the most amazing conversion experience of relief, total joy that I'd never felt before, knowing that, you know, this Savior was now walking in my life with me.
Wow.
It was such a confirmation, really, that something spiritual had happened. Yeah. Maybe I'm the kind of person that needs that kind, and God knows that of me. I've had quite a number of experiences through my life where Jesus has intervened very supernaturally.
Brilliant.
And then 1 month later, we were married.
It's just such a wonderful, wonderful story. How incredible. Oh, I love it. Wow. How had Will come to make that decision? You say that he'd written to you, so he'd obviously met some people and just began to talk through things with people while he was out there.
He went to a study with some Canadian doctors who were very influential in his early Christian life.
Right.
And they had been walking alongside him for some time. Yeah. And I think I'd been unaware of that.
Right.
And they had taken him into their family, as it were. He and the other Brit that he was living with, another guy. And they had done a study on love by David Watson.
Okay.
And at the end of the tape, they had said, do you want to take this home, Will? Because there's a little bit maybe you haven't heard. So he took it home, and at the end there was a call to anybody who wanted to become a Christian to say that conversion prayer, and that's when he became a Christian.
Right.
And so it's from that start.
Yeah. How lovely that you came to that decision separately but together before beginning your married life. That's exactly. Wonderful. Some people would say, Jenny, that faith, Christianity, belief in God is a crutch. Have you had people say that, or how would you answer that?
Well, as you've heard my story, I think I would have agreed with you. When I was at university, I thought people did need that crutch. And then I began to realize that actually this crutch that I thought God was actually made a difference in your life. This was what I could see in front of my very eyes. Here was conversion of a person I knew very well and loved very well and was very different. And then I could see it in my own life too. And I began to realize that I needed help. A crutch is there for somebody who needs help. And actually that's exactly what I needed. So as my Christian life has grown, I've realized that the Holy Spirit is that crutch for me. I don't like the word crutch because he's a friend, he's an inspiration, he's my leader, he's my guardian, he's my guide. The Holy Spirit is everything to me in my whole life as I've gone along. But if you want to call it a crutch, fine, I'll have a crutch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get that. Oh, that's brilliant. So you got married, and then what was your early married life? What were you guys doing, or where were you living?
Well, we immediately decided to go and do teacher training together. Although Will had been working as a teacher in Sierra Leone, he hadn't qualifications, so we needed that to start with. We knew that eventually we would probably want to go abroad, but that's where we went to Bath. We lived in the London Road. We prayed that God would give us accommodation with other people. We prayed that he would lead other people to us, and he brought 2 people who were members of the Workers' Revolutionary Party, and they lived with us for a year. That was really, I mean, God does have a sense of humor. And of course, we had our left-wing background anyway, but we were converted Christians. So it was quite interesting discussions between us. Enjoyed teacher training college very much. And then we moved up to Kent, where both of us began teaching in secondary school. I was teaching A-level sciences, and Will was teaching science in Sevenoaks. And we joined a Methodist church. I did say when I first became a Christian, I didn't want to be a tambourine banging Christian. So, if you know what I mean, I probably have become a tambourine banging Christian over the years, but at that stage, I needed something different.
Okay.
And the Methodist Church, we were probably the youngest by decades, but the teaching was good.
Right.
And I enjoyed it. And then a year later, so we'd been a Christian a year now, we decided God was calling us out to Swaziland. Okay. So then we moved from Kent to Swaziland, next door to South Africa, in between South Africa and Mozambique, really, where Will was going to set up an agricultural program, and I was going to do other things.
Brilliant. And so is that where your boys were born? I know you've got 2 boys. Were they born out there?
Yes, Jonathan and Matthew were both born in a little clinic on the hillside. It was a clinic run by our missionary organization. When we got there, we decided it would be good, because we were so young Christians, to join an organization that would help us to grow. And so we joined Campus Crusade for Christ at that stage. It was quite a young organization out there. Right. These are people just like us, just out of uni, and doing all sorts of things. We had the dairy maid to the king, there was all sorts of, there was dentists, nurses, teachers, they were all professionals, but working in Swaziland. Right. And so we were there, and our 2 boys were born there. And when they got to school age, we decided that, I decided to start a school. And so I started a very multicultural school. We weren't allowed to have Swazi children in our school, rightly so. It was for anybody who was not Swazi. So it was very multicultural. I had a class of 16 children with 11 different nationalities. Wow. It was a real mixing pot of education, but run on an English curriculum, really, as far as possible. Yeah. So we were very involved in the Methodist Church. Will was doing his lay training and preaching, and I was running Sunday school and working in the nursery. We had a nursery for 50 children, mostly Swazi children. And I learned so much from a Mennonite teacher that I worked with. Wow. She was a Canadian Mennonite, and every Mennonite I've met, I had true admiration for. She was a lovely lady, and she was a real expert early years. All my early years training I got from her. Right. So I went from A-level teaching to teaching in a nursery, which was a bit of a shock. But as I had my own children by then, and then I moved on to primary when we started our own primary school. The school went from 5 to 13, and it's still going now.
Really, that sounds like just such an amazing experience for you guys, but for your boys as well in growing up, and to have left that legacy, and to know that school is still there. That's amazing, really incredible. How long did you stay? When did you come back?
We were there for 8 years. So the little Methodist church that we started, there was only about 5 of us in it. to start, and it nearly died, really. And we tried going to another church, and we sat in this other vibrant church, feeling so badly, and knowing God wanted us to go back to that little Methodist church, which served a very different clientele, really. They were English speaking, but people who were from all over Africa, really. And so we went back and thought, well, how are we going to help this church? So we started a prayer meeting, and from that prayer meeting, that church grew and grew and grew. And it was so encouraging. And we've been back since, and it's so encouraging to see it's still thriving now. But it grew from prayer.
That's wonderful. And I love that as well, that, you know, we can be sometimes attracted to other things, can't we? Particularly something that seems very vibrant. But just to know that God was saying to you, actually, this is where I want you now, is really interesting. So your boys, obviously all big and grown up now. What are they up to, and where are they? They're not local, are they?
Well, one is, we moved back to the UK, and they went through school here in Suffolk. Then they did London universities and started careers in IT. So now they have both been in America from time to time, in New York, working in banks. But Johnny is still out there. Johnny has been out there 11, 12 years now in New York. He has a family. They're expecting another baby in June, and they're planned to come home. So we're so excited that they're
for good or for a visit?
Yes, for good. That's really exciting. And our other son Matthew, our elder, is in Colchester, actually. So we do get to see, he's got two children, an 11-year-old girl and a 9-year-old boy, and so we do get to see them. In fact, I'm doing weekly homeschooling with the 9-year-old, which is great fun. Science experiments that explode in front of your Zoom.
Lovely. So particularly with one of your sons out in New York, you must be so used to communicating this way. This must be what you've been doing for years, is it?
There's been often whole years when we've been on 3 different continents, the 3 of our families. And so we're quite used to Skype, email, phone calls. And it's amazing how even when you miss it for a few weeks, as soon as you're back on there, 2 minutes later, you're all as close as you were before. So I think we are a close family, and we do love each other very much. And it's been trying, but we just pursue it.
So thinking back to your career, so I think when I first met you, you were a head teacher. Had that always been the plan in going into teaching? Had you hoped that at some stage that's what you'd be doing? I mean, you talked about setting up schools, but had that always been in your mind that that's where you would be at some point?
No, it wasn't like a plan from the beginning. I'm going to be a head teacher. I have met people that have done that. It's never been my thinking. My career kind of has grown as I've grown into it. I mean, I've done everything now. I've taught every age from nursery to university. And so it's been a very broad career. And I've done from science A-level and maths at university to nursery teaching, and my favorite has been primary, and that's where I ended up. And yes, I am ambitious, and I was ambitious. I'm less ambitious now, of course, but I was ambitious because I think God gave me a gifting in leadership. In fact, I don't think that, I'm pretty certain God gave me a gifting in being a leader. And so it's something that I think as a Christian, my responsibility was to use that gift. And so I have used it. I've always prayed as my career has moved on and I've applied for the next role or the next role. I've always prayed, God, if this isn't your will, please shut the door. And he always has. He's been very, very faithful to, I've gone for some jobs that I thought, this is it. God really would like me to be in this job, and I haven't got it. And although you know, that's hurt to start with. When I have got a job, I know God wants me to be there. And even if it's difficult, and I've had difficult times in my career, then I know I'm where God wants me. And And so, yes, my ambition, I guess, as a head teacher, and I've been a deputy at Stonemaspel, I've been a head at Ockhold Primary, I was head at Sir Robert Hitchens in Framlingham for 14 years. Those are jobs that I always, as a Christian, wanted to do the very best I possibly could. And I loved my career. I loved my jobs. I loved the team that I worked with were phenomenally good, great teams of people in all the schools I've been in. And every day I would go in and pray for wisdom. My journey to Sir Robert Hitchens, which was a more challenging role to start with, was 25 minutes. And I used those 25 minutes to pray that God would give me the wisdom to make the right decisions and the right choices through the day. I can't say I always got it right. I didn't, but I did learn how to say sorry. I got things wrong and to correct them as fast as I could, and just to walk with God. I often would stay late and just walk around the classrooms and pray around them, that God would, fill those classrooms.
Yeah.
And he did. And the school became very popular.
I think that's really lovely to look back on it as well, and feel so positive about that whole career, and just like to remember it so fondly. That's lovely, isn't it? That's not everybody's experience. I think to just be able to speak so warmly about it is, yeah, just lovely.
I think the first 3 years, I have to say, were challenging because the governors asked me to make various changes, which I knew the school could do with having. And so it was a difficult time to start with. We were going through redundancy period, which is hard for everybody. And I lost teachers I was really sad to lose. I'd like to have kept them. And it was challenging. And there were days when I'd come home and say, God, are you sure you wanted me in this job? Are you sure? Have I got this wrong? And then I'd read something that would convince me, yes, he did want me there. He gave me several times when I had very appropriate Bible readings, which just kept me going through those times. But after about 3 years, I think we'd got ourselves into a kind of community of a family working together. And I think
it's really obvious from talking to you that you don't put God in a box at all, do you? You involve God in absolutely everything in your life. You involve him and you seek him out and you speak to him. He's just like a thread absolutely running through everything you do, isn't he?
That's right, exactly, yes. And when you can see real evidence of God working in what you're doing, then it encourages you. You need those experiences to encourage you. I mean, we had a little girl, I'll tell you this story. We had a little girl who her parents broke up and she was desperate about this. It was very, very important for her. And she was very, very upset. And I had taken her aside and talked to her about Jesus and how he is my friend and he can be her friend, and walk with her when she's feeling lonely and when she's missing daddy. And then the next day in main assembly, you've got to think there's probably about 200 children at that stage in that part of the school that were in there. Suddenly in the middle of the assembly, she put her hands up and she said, Mrs. Elphick, Jesus brought me a teddy last night in bed. And you're thinking, Jesus is real in these, can be real. That's exactly how she needed to see Jesus. Jesus had brought her a teddy. And I think, good for Jesus. He knows,
what she needed at that point.
What she needed was a teddy.
Not
a real one. It was in her dream, of course. So it was lovely. Anyway.
That's nice. So you speak so fondly about education and teaching and everything. So do you miss it? Is it kind of something that you kind of feel there's a loss there, that's not what you're doing now? Or is it just that life's moved on to something else?
I'm moving on in my life, and although I love to be involved in my grandchildren and their lives and what they're doing at school, and I'm always paying interest, I'm quite happy to leave it. I'm not grieving the loss of it.
And of course, because you haven't talked about you went back out to Africa, didn't you? And you spent time in Liberia, and that was a lot of that was around education as well, wasn't it? Were you doing some teacher training when you were out there?
That's right. Well, Will went out there to be the manager of the whole project for SIM, Serving in Mission, and I went out to start an education project. We arrived just a few years after 14 years of brutal civil war. The country was in crisis. Our mission was in crisis out there. It had been a very big mission before the war. There were over 150 missionaries out there doing all sorts of things in the country. And of course, they'd all gone. There were 5 there when we arrived, and they needed leadership. And I decided there was definitely a space for me to work as an educational trainer. The schools had all been blown down and knocked about. Many of the teachers had been killed because they were the academic classes. So many of them had lost their lives, or they'd left the country and gone somewhere else and hadn't returned. And so there was such a need for training. There was no bookstores or shops anywhere in the whole of Liberia. It's the 4th poorest country in the world. And so it was a real learning curve for me to learn, how do you train teachers to teach when they have no resources, and to put together as much as we could from what was available. Even paper was short, you know, pencils, that kind of
thing.
Did
you find that really hard? I mean, I remember on my first visit to Africa, I went to Uganda, and I was teaching in the UK, and we went into a school, and I just couldn't take in the extremes of the provision that we were making in the UK, and particularly as far as resources. I mean, I just went into a school in Uganda, just bare, absolutely bare. And I just thought about, you know, what I thought the most about was our backing paper in schools. And, you know, at times like having to mount things and double mount things and borders and colourful backing paper. And I just thought, and then we rip it down and then we start again. And I just thought, and they have nothing. It was upsetting. I found it really hard.
Yeah. I think, though, I'd already had somewhat of an experience with Swaziland, so I kind of knew a little bit more of what to expect, although Liberia is a lot poorer than Swaziland.
Right.
And so I was prepared for that. And in a way, you have to harden yourself, because if I went feeling miserable all the time, I'd be no use to anybody. And so you have to be positive and just look at what are the good things that can be provided. So even if it was a plastic plate with sand in it, and you're going to do fractions using a plastic plate with some sand in it, that's better than a teacher not knowing how to do fractions. And so you just work with what you had. And I had these wonderful men. I formed a committee. I worked with the schools that had been developed by SIM. There were 112 of them, and I worked with the schools that were working with those churches. So the whole of my project was very much based in Christian work as well. That was the center and the core of what we were doing. But I had a very good small committee, and they would go out with me to these rural schools, and we'd ask the head teachers, what training do you need? And of course, it's maths, English, phonics, all that kind of real basic stuff. But then after a couple of years, they were asking for other things like sex education. And that led on to, what is female genital mutation? You know, can we have a training on what that is about? And so a lot of it was challenging. Some of it was culturally challenging for me. And I would have to ask a lot of advice from my Liberian compatriots who are working with me. But it's a project that is now still working. They email and tell me about the training they're still doing with their staff. I've left a variety of resources with them. And
wonderful.
It's building into the community. So
that is so great. And you talked about the extremes of poverty in Liberia. I think one of the struggles that folk have with faith or Christianity or God is how does that make sense? You know, people will say, won't they, if there's a loving God, why does he allow this to happen? Why are there people living in such extreme poverty? I don't know if that's a question you've come across, or how would you answer that? How do you reconcile the God that you know with the things that you were seeing?
Right, that is a good and complex question.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'd be honest with you, living in that poverty was exhausting emotionally and physically as well. So every time you left the compound or the house, you would experience poverty that you've not seen before. You know, naked children sitting in the gutter with streams of mucus on their face, and the kind of feeling that you want to pick them up and take them home, and knowing you can't do that is tiring. And you don't want to grow hard and tough about it either. So we did do some training before we went and as we arrived about how to deal with the poverty ourselves. So I'll tell you about that. We decided the best form is to live love out in action. So you can do for the people in front of you what you can do. You do the best you can for the people around you, but you know you can't change everything. And actually just giving resources and money isn't always the answer either. No. In fact, in those kind of poor societies, just giving often completely unbalances the societies. My schools that I helped to run all charged a small fee, and that paid a very small income, less than $1 a day, Helen, to the teachers that worked in them. And then I'll give you an example. A Swedish organisation arrived and built a school next door to one of my schools on a place called Rock Hill, very poor area. And they said they were going to provide free education. They just arrived, built it with no talk to anybody in the community, then opened the doors and said it's free. And of course, there were no community links. People were very suspicious of them. They hadn't asked all the right questions. But of course, some children then left the schools that were small fee paying. And for a short time, not long, I have to say, but for a short time, it financially hit all the schools around because children left to go where it was free.
So they'd had an impact in the communities. Yeah.
Exactly. Then that school fell out with the community because they didn't have local roots, and it collapsed.
And didn't have relationship with people, I guess.
No,
hadn't established connection.
So although I was saying to Mr. Wee, who's the head of our school next door to it, oh, this is really worrying. And I was called Sis Jenny. Sis Jenny said, don't worry, you know, give it a year and it will collapse and we'll be back where we were. I mean, they've seen it before, this kind of just something for free and then go away, and it doesn't work that way. So why does God allow such sort of poverty? It is hard, but you know, we do live in a sinful world. The brutal civil war they had created a lot of this poverty. It's a country that shouldn't technically be poor in that way. It has all the facilities that it could have to be quite rich, actually. So man has created that poverty. It's a difficult climate, I have to agree. But if you actually looked at the Christians there, they were way more content and happy than half the people I know that live in our wealth on this side of the world. So it depends on what you're judging, doesn't it? Are we judging peace of mind, or are we judging how much food you've got in your fridge? Now, none of the Liberians I knew had investments. None of them had savings. And it was very hard then when difficult things happened, but actually it forced families to work together. You had a problem, you went to your larger family, the extended family, and that's how your social services worked. It was the extended family, and it brought very strong links into those families and into the Christian church as well. So I don't think I have all the answers, but in the end, help the person that's in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. You speak about your faith, and it's clearly absolutely integral to who you are, and it's strong. Has there ever been a time in your life, maybe because of experiences, have you ever doubted your faith? Have you ever even like rejected it at times?
I think I can honestly say I've never rejected it, but of course there's been doubts. I can't believe there'd be a Christian around that haven't said the things that happened that have made them doubt. I mean, we prayed so hard in Liberia that we started with 5, and we needed doctors, we needed people that could work the radio, we needed more teachers and Bible teachers. We prayed and prayed, and gradually we increased the mission till about 34, and we were just having a retreat to really celebrate and enjoy each other's company, because those 34 were spread all over the countryside. I mean, many of the places we went to, you had to go by helicopter. You couldn't get there any other way than flying. I went to some of my schools by helicopter.
Really?
Yes, a different sort of life, really. And at that point, Ebola struck, and it just knocked us for flat, absolutely. Yeah. And so we knew.
How long ago was that now, Jenny? When was Ebola?
Ebola struck in about 2013, 14, around there. I mean, there was rumours of it was coming down from the north, from what's the country just north of us, and we were getting ready for it because we had a hospital on our mission. We had a mission hospital. It was a very old mission hospital, and that's another story, more Will's story than mine, because through an American missionary organization, we managed to get funding for a new hospital. We got $4 million to build a new hospital, and we had just started doing that. So everything was really exciting and building and growing, and we had plans for a doctor training service because there's so few doctors. There was 4 dentists for 4 million people. You know, there just wasn't. And so we were excited about the things we were doing. And then Ebola struck. We got ready for Ebola to come to our part of Liberia, but we had to evacuate all of our families because the small children, this Ebola is spread by touch. You can't keep small children away from touching people. And so we evacuated so many, leaving just the doctors. Even their families left, but the doctors and the nursing staff, they stayed. And then 3 of our missionaries caught Ebola. And at that point, I think I really was at the bottom of my faith. My very best friend out there, Nancy, caught Ebola. And at that point that she caught Ebola, we'd had 40 cases come through our hospital, and all of them had died.
Wow.
So you're thinking, hang on, what's the chances? And it's a very long story, but God was so good to us. And they were all Americans. And thank goodness for the American military service. They managed to fly them out and got them back to America, where they could have, there wasn't a cure, but there were treatments that could keep you alive while your body overcame the virus. And that's what happened to them. So we had 2 doctors and Nancy, who was acting as an ancillary outside, who then went back to America and got cured. And 2 of them are back in Liberia now. So that's encouraging that they've continued to work there. But we did ask God, what are you doing? It's like climbing a mountain and falling off a cliff, really. But those experiences we all have in our lives, don't we? And maybe not exactly that one, but you know, experiences where you felt you've climbed a mountain and you've fallen off a cliff, but you survived. And you've grown and you've learned something. And I'll just say that Psalm 91 just kept me going. And I'll read one verse of it. This got me through Ebola. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him.
That's amazing. And I think, often that's what we're called to do, isn't it? Not necessarily like the circumstances, not necessarily understand them, but God says, just trust me. That's really interesting. I've just got a couple more questions really as we wrap up. Obviously we're all a bit restricted right now, and it's really interesting to hear all of your life journey. What's next on the Elphick adventures?
Well, in 2020, we were meant to be going back to Liberia. We were asked if we'd run a training project for child protection.
Right.
So we were planning to go in February, then it got delayed, thinking, oh, COVID will be over soon. And of course, it hasn't been over. And so that's kind of on the back burner. It's a possibility for the future. But apart from that, I really love my running mates. I have 3, there's 4 of us in our group, and they're a great group of women. I learned so much from them. You might have
to explain for people that don't know what running mates are, because people are now imagining you running 10k.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the last thing no, I have a group, there's 4 of us. We meet regularly to share, to have fun together, to be honest with each other, to keep each other kind of on the straight and narrow. We're studying a book at the moment called Battlefield for Your Mind. It's a really good book, all about how we think about what we're thinking about, and how our thinking influences what comes out of it. So we're enjoying that book at the moment. Obviously, we can't meet face to face, so we're doing it through WhatsApp and sharing the book and commenting, and occasional meetups when we can. Then I have a 10-week group which we're really enjoying. And
you're leading that, aren't you?
Yeah, my husband Will and I lead it together, and there's about 11 of us, and we have fun. We probably do too much laughing, but we do enjoy it.
Can you do too much laughing?
Not. And we're studying with that group as well. We're studying a book called Notorious. It's all about rogues of the Bible, and how much we can learn from people who got it wrong.
Brilliant.
We're looking at that.
Great.
And I run the lunch club in our village. So we provide monthly lunch groups for about 30 or 40 people. But of course, we haven't been able to meet, so I'm trying to stay in touch with people as best as possible. And we're just enjoying being retired.
Yeah, sounds absolutely lovely.
And we enjoy that. So
sounds really lovely. I think you're really inspirational, Jenny. I think your journey of life and the things you've set up and the experiences you've had, and the fact that still like new things and just excited about what you're doing is lovely. I think lots of what you've said as well might resonate with people, particularly talking about how you came to faith and how involved God is in your day-to-day life. I just always want to remind people when we're chatting that if this is something that interests you as you're listening, we would love to help out. We would love to journey with people, get in contact with us. I'm sure Jenny would be really happy to talk more with people, wouldn't you, Jenny, if this kind of raised questions in their minds. So do tap into us. We want to help people find Jesus. So if we can do that, we want to help. Just the last question. You just spoke there about that verse that really got you through that time when Ebola had hit, and you were just struggling with understanding all of that. Are you somebody that kind of has like a life verse or a motto or something that you regularly go back to, or is that not something that's for you?
I probably have a number of them for different circumstances, but I think if I was going to pick one overall, it would be Philippians, which is rejoice in the Lord always, and I say again, rejoice.
Lovely. What a lovely.
Which you can use at any time, disasters, happiness, rejoice.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a lovely way to end our chat together as well. I've loved chatting to you today. Thank you so much for giving me your time, Jenny. I've learned loads about you, and as always, you are really inspiring. So thank you for giving me your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Will do. In the snow.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.